Lens selection can have a big effect on your landscape photography. The two main ones are composition. Clearly, what focal length you have on your camera can affect how that image is composed. And secondly, also the perspective of how it looks is greatly affected by what lens you select. I'll put a couple of pictures up now. Now, with this particular shot, this is shot with a 200mm lens. It was actually shot with a zoom lens, but on a 200mm setting. And we're looking down on the mist on top of the trees. We're quite high up looking down. And by using the 200mm, it has obviously affected the composition as in what we're looking at. And I'll show another picture of the bigger, broader view so you can see what it's come from. But it's zeroed in on the mist. And look at the perspective. You see how it's flattened it out? It's brought it all together. It's really altered the perspective. It's given that real telephoto look of compressed look. Here's a broader view of the exact same scene. And this is shot with a 90mm lens, giving the much bigger, broader perspective. So immediately you see the effect. You can see how by using the telephoto lens, the stronger telephoto lens, the 200mm, we've zoomed in for composition, as in we've gone in much tighter into the scene and got that one particular shot of the area of mist, as well as the perspective is even further compressed and given that compressed look as well. This one is shot with a 35mm perspective. This is a 35mm wide angle lens, and we're getting the full vista across. We've opened it up. We've got the dramatic clouds. And this is the same scene shot with a 200mm. So again, notice the dramatic difference. So I'll just go back over it again. That's the 35mm view. We've got a lovely wide vista, which is one. It's a lovely shot. It's atmospheric. It's fantastic. It's of a particular style. And bang, we move over here. Now we move over here to where we are at the same location, shot with a 200mm lens. I think about 10 minutes later it was this particular shot, something like that. So again, we've suddenly now got a very, very different picture because we've selected a 200mm lens versus a 35mm lens. Now I'll just put up a couple more to get the sense of it all, which is here we are at the sun's just about to rise on. This is a sunrise in a winter's morning. Very beautiful, dramatic, nice wide shot with a 35mm lens, wide angle lens. Got the clouds, we've got some foreground with the rocks, with the dramatic winter sunrise. Now, this is a completely different field shot where we've gone for the 200mm again. So again, this is a 35mm wide shot. Again, then showing the juxtaposition of the same scene. A little bit later, 200mm lens, we've got a very different thing. Look at that cloud above the sunrise there. It's almost abstract. Got the rocks in the foreground, got the blurred water, nice long exposure and everything. It's the same subject, but boy, does it have a different feel. Is it a different statement? It really is. Very different. Same scene, 35mm lens, 200mm lens. So I've just put those shots up to illustrate the point that how different an image can be by the lens selection, and see how different they are, see how different the feel is, see the difference in the perspective. It's important to understand the different lens types. There's zoom lenses, there's prime lenses, they're the fixed lenses. Zoom lenses, they come in wide angle perspective. Anything like there's, as an example, 16mm lens to a 35mm zoom lens. That's a wide angle zoom lens. And for the telephoto zooms, one that I particularly enjoy working with is the 70 to 200mm zoom lens. That's another example. There is a variety of zooms out there, but I mentioned those two from a landscape point of view. They can be quite a good range for landscape photography, in my opinion. So to recap, lenses come in zooms, they come in primes, and primes are fixed. So you'd have, for example, a 24mm wide-angle lens, 35mm wide-angle lens, a 100mm telephoto lens, a 200mm telephoto lens, a 300mm telephoto lens. There's all these different ones. So you've got your fixed and you've got your zoom. Traditionally, zooms have always been looked upon with lower quality. However, they have, in recent times, the quality of the zooms have got better and better and better. So there really are some very good quality zoom lenses out there now. So you have wide angle, 24mm, 35mm lenses. Then you have a standard lens, which comes generally with the camera. And then there is the telephoto lens, and anything from 80mm and above is a telephoto lens. And it can range right through to extreme telephotos, where it's quite a specialist area to handle the extreme telephoto lenses for wildlife, etc. Often you'll see 200mm, 300mm, and 400mm lenses used a lot in sports and wildlife photography. And of course, you can go much further in situations such as wildlife. You can be there with a 600mm, an 800mm, and beyond. And as I say, that can be quite a specialist thing to handle. Lens selection. So how do you actually choose a lens? We understand there's the zoom, there's the prime. How do we go about it? A number of things come into play, and a lot of them are very practical things. The first thing is, are you on a budget? If you're on a budget, well, prices will vary greatly. It is much cheaper to buy a slower lens. So let's say you were to buy a 70 to 200mm lens. Often that comes in f2.8 as the wide open lens that stays consistent, 2.8 all the way from 70 to 200. And then you can buy typically an f4 version, f4.5 version, and that's going to be a lot cheaper. And then also you can go for brands, different brands. Like as an example, a Canon or a Nikon brand or a Sony brand is going to be dearer than a Tamron brand, as an example. And there's many different types out there. One way to get the price down a bit, which is the brand and the f-stop. Immediately that will bring the prices down. Another thing to take into consideration is the weight of lenses. So even if you're on a completely unlimited budget and you go out and you buy all these amazing lenses on 300mm, 2.8, etc., and they're just amazing. But the one thing that having an unlimited budget doesn't fix is that they're heavier. So now when you head off on your landscape adventures, if you need to go a distance, it's all very well if you can park and walk 2 meters and there's your photo. If you've got to walk a reasonable distance to get to the photograph, suddenly weight plays a real impact, regardless of how fit you are. A couple of big solid lenses with tripod, etc. That's some serious weight to carry. It really is. So weight is another consideration with your lens. If you're traveling, as in on going out to the airport, getting on aircraft, suddenly bulk also comes into play. How you're transporting it. Are you taking it on as hand luggage? If you get a couple of fast lenses, as in f2.8 telephoto lenses, they're bigger, and put a couple of those in your camera bag with a camera and a tripod. It bulks out compared to buying, say an f4.5 telephoto. 200mm lens is going to be less bulky than the 2.8. Another factor to think about when selecting a lens, a lot of lenses are treated for where there's light drizzle and things like that. If there's a bit of moisture in the air, if there is light drizzle, a lot of lenses have weather treatment, weather sealing. That can be relevant. So if you know that you're going to go and be out in that environment a lot of time, that's certainly something to look at. Focus modes. I'm somebody where if you're shooting landscapes, you're probably going to find yourself doing manual focusing anyhow. I certainly do. But if you're going to be doing landscapes and a lot of other different types of photography, well, then you might be looking at some of the autofocus becomes a very important, its response rate and everything might become very important. But with landscapes, where you often there's no problem with doing your own manual focus, and certainly with depth of field, often it's a very, you want to take over your focus and have control of that yourself rather than just rely on autofocus. If you're looking at one of the much dearer lenses, you're wanting a fast lens that's quite pricey, one of the things you can do is go and potentially rent it and see how you get on with it, how you like it. That's another option to experiment and see whether you like those particular lenses or not. As far as lenses that I would recommend, with landscape, I'm certainly somebody that does keep weight in mind. And if I'm going to be carrying weight, I'd rather be carrying the weight of a heavier tripod that's going to give me that sturdiness that I love, rather than be carrying that weight in a whole stack of lenses. So my own direction that I go, I'm often out shooting with my very basic kit of a 35mm wide-angle lens, and then I have the Canon 70 to 200mm f2.8 lens, which is the zoom lens. I like that as well. Another option with the wide-angle lens, there's a 16mm through to a 35mm f2.8 zoom lens. I think that's also an attractive potential option. It's very personal choice, but if you go through the factors that we've just talked about, it certainly narrows the lenses right down. And if you are trying to keep weight down, go to the zoom lenses, because you're going to be, instead of carrying a number of fixed lenses, you'll be carrying, as an example in this particular case, the wide angle zoom as an example, 16mm to 35 and a 70 to 200mm telephoto zoom. So in that, you've covered a great deal. Plus, you'd have your standard lens as well, potentially. But even if you bought the body without the standard lens, you've still got a big array of perspective for your landscape photography. So I hope you found this video useful. If you would like to take your photography further, do check out my online photography course at improveyourphotography.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And have fun with your landscape photography.